you stick your round in there, and you just really gently clamp onto the bearing surface of that bullet. And then with this other knurled knob, you can then back that case off your bullet by thousandths at a time.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Vortex Nation podcast. And speaking of welcome back, gentlemen, welcome back. We have 3 repeat guests today for our shooting-based gear and review. That's right. It's still January. It still qualifies as the new year in my book-ish. And, man, welcome, guys. I'm really pumped about this. We did a podcast a couple weeks ago. Had some guests, some usual suspects. It was more of a hunting-focused gear in review. So now we've got the, kind of the shooting, tactical, competitive shooting, and I think we have the right people for the job.
When they showing up.
Chris is looking around, being modest. Guys, this is going to be awesome. You guys have all brought things to talk about. These are going to be items that you started using this last year, 2024, that you really liked and likely will use moving forward.
Correct.
Yep. Can do this a little bit of a round table. Start left to right with my left.
That'd be me.
We'll start with Chris. Yeah.
Well,
what do you got going on, man? What'd you use in 24 that you're like, man, that worked really well?
Well, I mean, I've continued along my kind of journey of, being the absolute best pistol shooter I can be. And full disclosure, Walther has been very generous to me. I'm not making a dime or anything like that, so I guess that goes without saying. But I mean, they did send me this PDP, which started its life black, and of course I did the right thing and
got to change
FDE,
that.
Of course,
yeah.
That was the only incorrect thing I noticed when I got it. So, since July 1st when I got it, I've then put about 31,000 rounds on it. I mean, I've taken it to classes myself, where I myself was a student. I've shot it a ton, and it's really grown on me, and I think it's become a staple in not just my personal development. I've carried it. I run it when I put on trainings and classes. I took it to ORD. I took it to a bunch of different events. And
what's ORD?
Ohio Range Day.
Okay.
Yeah. It actually, speaking of 2024, this is the first year that Vortex Edge was there, and we actually instructed. So.
Oh, cool.
And that again at the forefront, was this PDP. So, it's been an interesting year. Made a lot of memories behind this gun. So it's kind of really grown on me.
What are some features of this pistol, and what are you liking about it?
I find that now going from like the PDP, and when I go back to shooting my Glocks, or at least I dry fire with my Glocks, I do notice like I have to work a little bit, and what I mean by that is just I have to bring the gun down a little bit to see the dot. With this is almost effortless, which is kind of huge to me, especially with the amount of time I put on behind dry fire and shooting. To not have to work so hard to see the dot is actually a pretty attractive feature for me.
Do you know what about the pistol is allowing that to happen?
Yeah, ergonomically, I think the angle is
okay.
Is a little better suited for my wrists and my lack of flexibility, so to speak. It allows me to index the dot on a spot on the target that I'm looking at, and it allows me to do that consistently, effortlessly. When I draw, and it's considerably heavy. So like I spend a lot of time and I'd say money in trying to make my Glocks as heavy as they can be, especially for competition use. I mean, I think to some extent, like a lot of people out there do that. This thing comes out of the box, a tank. You know what I mean? And it's a lot of fun to shoot. It's been a lot of fun to get to know the gun, and it's grown with me. And yeah,
it's interesting because of the activities that I typically engage in. I'm spending a lot of time and money to take weight out.
Right. Yeah, no, with handguns, I some call me a nerd and whatnot, but I do expend a lot of trying to research like the part that gives me the most amount of weight in the gun, makes it more returnable, makes it behave more predictably for me. Mm-hmm. It's a personal preference of mine, but this thing, like I said, it just comes out of the box heavy and ready to go, and it's really a really polite gun to shoot.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
Very cool. What any notable wins or improvements as far as like you've seen, like, measuring your times and things like that?
I don't know if it's allowed me to necessarily improve my shooting. It's just certain things that I've kind of adapted to my training regimen. Certain classes that I've been to this year. Probably most notably, I went to the Practical Shooting Training Summit in October and picked up a lot of neat tricks that have helped me kind of, and I'm seeing like vast improvements in my shooting. And it's just working different grip things, different things with my vision. And now to have like a handgun that can essentially shoot better than I can and is basically waiting for me to shoot it faster and faster and more aggressively has been pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen you shoot, maybe not, super recently, Chris. So to have you're a darn good pistol shot. So it's wild to think that you could get better.
There's always meat on the bone.
When did you get it?
July 1st.
You got it July 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've had it for about 6 months. And I don't think you stuttered. You said 30 or 31,000.
I ended the year at 30,919 rounds. I track. I'm very meticulous about how many rounds I fire. And then last week I put about 1,000 behind it, so it puts me right about at.
Yeah, that is so. Like a lot of people who shoot a lot, like outside of the professional space, like people we would locally see at a USPSA match, they would talk in terms of I put 3,100 rounds on a gun in a year. Chris put 31,000 rounds on a gun in 6 months. That is a lot of ammo, and like it's not. I feel like a lot of people pull those numbers out of their heads, but like you actually are fairly regimented in like, a practice session. You know how many you shot in that session.
Yep.
Demoing for a class, you know how many you shot demoing for a class. So like that is an actual probably a pretty close number, and you have a sample size of 1, right?
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of people even like, I'm not gonna name names, but like people sponsored by major firearms manufacturers, a lot of times will be like, well, I have so many thousand rounds on it, but they have multiple specimens. There's a practice gun and a match gun, and a demo gun and a practice gun. So that is a lot of ammunition to put through one gun.
Yeah.
And guns I have that have that high round count, I'm also starting to look towards major parts breakages just from
100%.
wearing out. Have you seen any of that yet? Like, have you seen any extractor tension yet? Or?
Yes. So the extractor was probably the first thing I started to have issues with. I was having certain ammunition types that were starting to not want to come out of the chamber, especially after fired. I've talked to those guys. They sent me a brand new extractor assembly, and it's again just a brand new gun in essence. And it's like there's been. I would expect like accuracy fall off to have occurred by now, especially as hot
my next
as I've gotten
question.
it. It hasn't fallen off at all. It's still the gun that I'll demo with when I'm putting on classes, especially down at Vortex Edge. And but yeah, the extractor was definitely the first thing to go. Right, I started to have pretty consistent issues. I've gotten a new extractor put in, and it's a brand new gun, and haven't had. I think I have the exact date when I got the extractor, but I think I'm at like 6 now, 6,000 maybe of that was with the new extractor, and it's been pretty solid. Other than that, I did have to replace the spring, the recoil spring in it.
Which you would have to on any. That's
yeah.
a wear part.
Yep. So
that's like changing oil on your car.
And there's a couple different. There's a lot of people running this gun out there. I prefer the long stroke guide rod that comes from ZRT Tactical or ZR Tactical. I just find it the recoil impulse is like nothing I've ever shot before. But anyway, so that spring wore out. I talked to those guys. They sent me a replacement at a heavier weight. So now it's like a totally different gun. It shoots even better than it used to. So, but I did notice that, it wasn't locking back on empty mags. It wasn't. It felt a little sluggish. Maybe like when I was making ready, I had to like actually help to slide forward. But different things that would lead you to believe that maybe there's the recoil spring starting to go. So getting a new one in there again. Between getting the new extractor assembly, getting a new recoil spring in there, it's just a totally new gun. You know what I mean? I'm anticipating at some point the barrel just calling it quits on me. But
barrel's a wear item too, like a transmission.
Right, for sure.
It wears out slower than engine oil.
Yeah.
But
For you
will
pistol
replace
shooters,
it.
how do you decide when it's time to change that pistol barrel?
So
You know.
yes. So
It tells you.
yeah, number one, I know the groupings that it had out of the box. Like, we're talking like 15 yards, 25 yards. Like, if you shoot B8s, like, you imagine just like the holding like inside of the tendering, pretty consistently. I haven't noticed anything deviating outside of that level of accuracy. What I have noticed is certain rounds, it will start to keyhole. It's always not liked one particular round, and I'm not gonna, name drop or anything. But I try to stay away from that. It shoots and eats literally everything other than this one type of ammunition. But yeah, the things that I'd be looking for is like keyholing, of course, an opening of group, especially like when you have like unexplained flyers that are, hey, I watch my red dot lift from the center of the target, but there's this delta in the upper right. Like that's usually an indicator the barrel's like definitely starting to go, especially on a pistol.
A good friend of mine on the 3-gun team, one of our sponsored shooters, he shot out a 2011 style pistol that you would pay $6,000 for now. And he's had it, like, as long as I've known him for 10 years, right? So he's had it this whole time. Just this spring, he shot the barrel out on that. And it went from 1 week he was training, didn't think anything of it. Then he went to a match and, like, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden it was just like, like they're just way into outer space. Like they're not flying straight anymore.
Yep. I mean, other than like putting the gun and shooting it like under super slow mo and like actually getting an appreciation for the flight of the bullet coming out of that barrel.
Yeah.
Like
eventually it's going to show up.
What
on
you
paper.
print on
It's
target
like,
is going to show up.
Not,
yeah, exactly.
That's not right. Like
Yep.
some of those ammunition types in some other guns, kind of like we were talking in the 1911 episode. Like I shot it and I knew it was a good shot, and then I saw it fly stage right. Like I was like, through the sight, I saw it land somewhere else. I'm like, okay, that's not correct.
Right. Or you have like a really tight group overall, and then there's one where it's like you see the outline of the projectile sideways in the bullet.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yeah, this thing doesn't like that.
And that bore starts grabbing fouling a lot sooner.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Have you handled a new one since you've had this one?
I have, not my personal guns.
No,
but
but
like
another
other people's.
one.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one of the things that I really dig about pistols and like pistols that get high mileage on them is like how they break in. Can you articulate like what does this pistol feel like broken in compared to a new one?
So I don't own any 1911s personally, but I've definitely shot some years and a couple other guys. Like I feel like the relationship between lower and upper is very tight but very smooth. You know what I mean? Like this one is just the exact same. It's just like working a slide that's made out of glass. So it's very smooth, very very reliable lockup. So that lockup still exists. It's just a little freer. Whereas like with a brand new one, you may have a little more resistance in working the slide. Obviously, some of the controls are take a little more oomph starting off to run. Like maybe like the slide release might be the one that comes to mind. The mags are falling a lot freer these days. You know what I mean? But yeah, overall, it's just like it feels like a gun that's been shot.
But it wears in, not out. Like
right.
Some of the polymer frame guns, when they get high mileage on them, they feel clapped out. I couldn't even articulate to you how. It's just when you pick it up, it's like
they're gritty. They make sounds that you didn't hear.
It still works, but you could tell this one's high mileage compared to the other ones, and that's some of what I think is cool about these. Is they break in and they'll go the distance a long time, replacing wear parts. I mean, you probably won't wear out the frame and slide on that.
Probably not. No, and I mean,
but you're gonna try.
I mean, what? I'm definitely. I've given it a good college try, but I think for what they asked for the gun, I mean, you should expect that, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, like you should be looking to make an investment like that and know, okay, am I going to put 31,000 rounds in it inside of 7 months? Probably not, but I know that I can.
What's one of these? Do you know off the top of your head, like retail? What are these going for?
I think off the shelf 1,800. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, which if you look back to like all the things I've had to do to a Glock to get them to like the way I like, so like stippling, for any kind of frame modification, certainly all those like heavy tungsten and brass parts that I like to nerd out and put into Glocks, like into my Glocks personally, triggers, springs, whatever else, like you start getting up there. So it goes from being like a $700 gun, and you're upwards of $1,400-$1,600 at the end of it. You know what I mean? So I think just for $1,800 you get a really, really, really good, polite, reliable gun. So
And really, all you did in this one was a guide rod system?
yeah, just a guide rod. I mean, so here I'll clear it out really quick. So Walther is actually good enough to send you the plate, so you don't have to go with an aftermarket plate like I did. But this is an Arise plate from Arise Manufacturing. It comes with this really, really, really good trigger, which is their dynamic performance trigger, and yeah, it's ready to go. Like you can literally like pull it out of the box, put your dot on it. You can either get an aftermarket plate or wait for a week or so for their plate to come in, and then like go shoot a match and start training with it pretty aggressively. But yeah, all I've done is just switched out the guide rod. As you can see, what makes it the long stroke. So like that's typically where you would see a regular guide rod stop, right, in its travel. But the long stroke just gives you a little more. As you can see, you can actually see
it's stroked.
Yeah, so it
Okay.
changes. It changes the recoil pattern. Some find that they feel like they have to wait, or there's a delay for the slide to go forward. I don't. I'm ripping 12 and 13, or I'm sorry, 0.12 and 0.13 splits, and the gun is still there waiting for me.
That's like Ryan says. That's the seconds between seconds,
Right.
type stuff.
Right.
Well, I think's cool though. So stock trigger and trigger springs.
The only thing that I've done to the trigger is I changed the I forget what
Like
it's
a
called.
connector spring or something?
No, so there's no connector spring, but there's a return spring.
Oh, yep.
So the spring here, I can, if you guys don't mind, I can break this guy
Not
apart.
at all.
And it's a little dirty, but you can, that spring right there, I guess it's called a trigger return spring, is the only thing I changed out. So that guy, and then this is that guide rod, which it's all captured, but it is longer. So there is a part, a shim or so, or something like that you have to remove from the slide in order to get this guy to work. Once it's in there, it's captured, and it makes the gun so much more polite. Now, some people will favor a faster, more aggressive return than like a softer shooting slide, which, to each his own. I just think that this is like the best of both worlds. I get both a softer impulse going back, and I get a solid return forward. And like I said, I've not noticed like, oh, I could be shooting right now and the gun is still cycling. Like, I think that's, what are you looking at? Like 0.6, 0.06 or something like that?
Yeah.
For the gun to cycle? I'm never...
It's stuff that you feel, but it's hard to measure.
Right.
And if you can feel it, it matters to you. And if it doesn't, well, then, yeah, you don't.
Yep.
Don't worry about it.
I know a lot of really good shooters that are running this system. And, yeah, so collectively, all these parts make a really, really good gun. And, all it is like this guy, that spring, and that's it.
Yeah, that's interesting. They brought the stroke system in there. That comes out of 2011s, where essentially they would cut this part of the slide, the muzzle part of the slide. They cut material off there so that the slide could travel farther back. They're trying to reduce the hit of when it bottoms out. They're almost trying to let it like sling back as far as it wants to go, and then go forward. So that's cool. They brought that. That's the first time I've heard of that in a striker fired system pistol.
Yeah.
But I think it's a cool gun because most of the guns it competes against in USPSA, dudes they're buying an $1,100, $1,200 gun, and they're throwing another
easily $600-$700.
At least 3-4.
Yeah.
They're putting brass grips on them.
Right.
They're putting Seattle slugs and Glocks. They're putting weighted material in the grip to plug up that thing.
Like all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
They're changing trigger systems. They will completely change out the trigger system sometimes. The springs that Chris has changed, most people are going to do that whether it needs it or not, just to play around with it. And it's kind of a negligible amount of money. Springs cost $20 maybe.
Yeah, I think this one is an Overwatch spring, and I think I paid, I want to say $8. You know what I mean? And all it did is just made the wall less like intrusive. Like I just get to the wall now, and it's just a little more press, and I get to the rest of the trigger pull. So
And you did that off the go, though? That wasn't like a wear part? That was something like,
No, to be fair, I shot...
But it will be. It will be
Yeah.
a wear part that you replace. So.
Yeah, eventually I'll have to replace that. I'm sure. I think I started like my first week or two just completely bone stock,
Mm-hmm.
and then just talking to people like, hey, what do you think about the trigger on this thing? It's like, oh, dude, you gotta try changing the spring out, and here's this link, and then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, there's a noticeable difference in the trigger, so I've not gone back.
I mean, that seems like a really good way to go to like before you start swapping stuff out.
Yep.
Run it,
Yeah.
and then see if you do
Right.
even notice a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of guns that are marketed as match ready, especially for a carry optics segment. There's a lot of them marketed as match ready. I think there's maybe 3 that actually are, that people aren't going to just off the gate want to throw money at. And I would say this is definitely one of them. It was definitely targeted to be that. It's, right up against the weight limit that they want for carry optics that people are trying to get to, because there's a ceiling as to how heavy it can be in that game. So people will add weight to the pistol to get it there as a competitive advantage.
Possible,
yeah. So where this one is pretty much, aside from the aesthetics that he did to it, out of the box, you pretty much put oil and ammo in it, and it's
ready to go, right? I mean, I don't have a magwell put on this because again, I intend to make this kind of like a carry optics friendly like setup, right? So but it comes with a really, really good magwell. And then there's enough aftermarket base pads. This guy's a Henning, which I kind of married it to because it works without the magwell. These won't work if I install the magwell on there.
What magazine is that then?
These base pads.
The base pad.
Yep.
Okay.
Again, came black, and the same guys, CMB Quality Coatings out of Savannah, Georgia. The same guys that refinished the gun for me refinished these guys and just added like a little grip texture. You can actually check those out.
Yep, the Henning group. They're a friend of Vortex. A lot of us use their base pad stuff, but that's another thing too. Like, what do you think retail price is on the magazine itself, unmodified?
So just
a Walther
18,
mag,
like an 18-round body is still like $60.
$60, which is decent.
Yeah,
it's a good magazine, not super expensive. And then if you're gonna play games with it, adding another $60, $40 extension to it. I mean, you have a $100 competition magazine, and it's based off a good body. Like, you don't have to do. There are some systems where you have to kind of get in here and play with them a little bit to get them where you want to be. But essentially, it's a good body. You put a quality extension on it, and it has a good spring in it. The magazines aren't super expensive because to play games, to take classes, to do high volume shooting, you're looking at having at least 6 of those things,
for sure,
if not more.
Don't ask me how many I have.
Yeah, we never really disclose. It's kind of like how many guns you have. You never really talk about how many mags you have.
Magazines I have. Anyway, like I said, it's been a faithful gun. It's been a lot of fun to get to know, and I've made some memories with it. You know what I mean?
Very cool. Is it a gun that you would carry? Like
I have
EDC? Yeah.
Yeah, I have. The only thing was when I started to experience those higher round count like extraction issues, I was like, I might not want to carry this. So I started carrying a PDP X Pro, which is a comp version of their polymer gun. So I just carry that and just have and of course I train a lot with that as well. But I put a decent amount of rounds on that. But I figure like this is a really good, just like if I'm teaching or if I intend on shooting a match, like this is my carry optic setup. Boom, let's go. And I put the rounds on with this guy and just kind of make this a dedicated setup.
Awesome, man.
Well, and like tools of your trade too, like Chris is working with a gun on a daily basis. So if it was his carry gun, he would have to unload the carry ammunition out of it, reload it at the end of the day.
Sure.
That ammunition is expensive even if you get a discount on it. And so like just wear and tear on it, even if I have a gun that I would carry, usually the carry guns are separate from the guns we're working with, just in a class environment or in a match environment, just because you're loading and unloading the thing all the time.
So, that's a great question, Mark. Actually, like I used to carry and run this gun in both teaching and like, and matches and stuff. Like, but I have the holsters that allow me to do that. So, I guess that's my other items. But just these holsters. This is an OVRT from TXC, which I've come to love. It's a great kind of competition style holster. And then this is an APX from, and this was a brainchild and kind of a collaboration between Point One Tactics, Donovan Moore from McHenry, Illinois, and the guys over at Tier 1. They designed this system that allows you to kind of like customize almost on an infinite basis where you want your magazines and stuff. So having this in hand made it really cool to just get done with, shooting, instructing a class or shooting a match, and then, all right, throwing this on, and now it's time to go home, right? But, to some extent, I started to recognize, okay, I'm putting a lot of rounds on this thing. And at the time I was having the issues I was having, so this became more of a dedicated, like, teaching and match gun than it did anything else.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
But now that, and I actually just kind of broke this out this morning. I was like, I should start carrying this thing now that I'm starting to like find that reliability again. Especially after changing the extractor out, I'm definitely going to start carrying this guy again. Like, yeah, it's a really, really fun gun to shoot and carry.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool system.
Yeah, and that just dropped last year too. So don't have a lot of time, and I've got a lot of time actually. I was handed this when I went and trained with those Tier 1 guys, and they were hosting Billy Barton last year from Spec Train, and Aaron Clark handed me this. I was like, wow, this is really cool.
Well, and what's innovative about it is that kind of honeycomb piece on the side
the
there.
panel.
Like lots of people do Kydex, appendix holsters. A lot of people do the sidecar setup. What's really cool about this one is that honeycomb piece on the side where you can start to manipulate where the magazine rides and what cant it's at.
You can even choose like where relative to the holster itself. You can have the panel kind of mounted behind. Donovan texted me one day. He was like, "Bro, try to put it on the front of a holster, and it like conceals the magazine better, and it also makes it just easier to grab." So this is. I mean, it conceals very well, but it's still kind of gamey. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
it's still really gamey. So I still run this pretty aggressively in terms of like performance shooting. So
I just assumed they were speed holes. That's what I was.
that's it. It makes the drag on it. No,
yeah.
I don't.
It's better ventilation for the summer. Yeah.
Another thing that I think that this panel does really well is I've broken holsters. I've broken a lot of like sidecar style holsters that will have like the Kydex be super rigid and that connection point be super rigid, and it puts a lot of stress kind of on the wrong parts of the holster and the mag carrier. So what I think this does beautifully is, and I think you're going to speak to that on your kit.
Probably,
I won't steal your thunder, but like it moves.
Sure,
Yeah,
a little bit of flexibility there.
Right. It doesn't put any stress on the Kydex. It's all the stress and all the, all relative stress, right? But it's all on this panel that's kind of designed to move. And yeah, I've yet to break one. I think the only time I cause any issues and I cause I cause those guys some headache is I put too many of these spacers on there, and it started to actually push back against my belt so much that it bent the hole that screw sits in under there. And so I was like, hey guys, what the heck? And they were like, bro, you've got like 7 spacers in there. Don't do that. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I went back to, a mere mortal 4 spacers. And that's it. So that spacer bar here pushes on the inside of your belt and just, again, allows the magazine to conceal better along the body. So,
okay.
I mean, the adjustability that you have, not just in how many spacers you have at the at the magazine and at the gun. If I took all of this off, you can see all the adjustability you have here on the panel, on the holster itself in terms of like ride height. I mean, and then of course they sell, and they have like a wedge pack. Again, I've decided like I can get away with a lot when I carry. So I stay away from the wedge packs, and that's what allows this thing to just be really gamey when I run this thing and train with it. So, yep, that's my other thing. So that and my holsters.
I dig it, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Adam, what have you brought for us today?
It's my turn?
Yes. I'm sorry.
No, let's go. I was like, are we doing this Christmas style? Like you open up one and then, I like Chris. I brought some holster gear as well. If I had to think about like new stuff that I'm trying, it's usually around like concealed carry stuff, like a lot of match stuff. It kind of gets pretty pretty fixed in time. But some stuff that I'm really excited about from this year, I started trying the most underrated part of a concealed carry system is the belt. It is probably the most important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know how many people I have come through classes who are concealed carry. And I'm not gonna like steer somebody away from training, like at a Pistol 1 or something like that.
Yeah.
But with their stuff. But the first thing I look at is belt, and like, dog, you're running like a super flexible leather belt. You know what I mean? Like that's no-go criteria. You know what I mean? Like, you need something a little more rigid.
It seems basic, but it's like I was having this conversation with my parents the other day. They were having like brake issues on their car. They had like warped rotors on their cars, and they're like, "Well, is that big of a deal?" And it's like, it's your brakes. Like that's
what stops the car.
Yeah, it's like, well, I mean, I can get behind. It's like it's your brakes, like
do you like stopping?
Yeah, do you like stopping?
Yeah, do you not like continuing your
so,
speed?
Okay, Ian's a little indifferent.
Yeah, so like, and that's kind of the thing I put belts into is like, well, it's kind of it's the least sexy part of the whole thing, but it's what holds all the weight, and so
I mean, it does seem like a linchpin in the system,
right?
Yeah,
right,
and it's probably when I started carrying, it was the hardest part to spend money on. Like, you can spend money on a gun, no problem. Well, maybe I'll try a cheap holster first, and then you get through that and you start buying good holsters. Belts is another one. Like, geez, it's a belt. Like, how much am I going to spend $100 on a belt? But when you actually start wearing good gun belts, it's like, oh, this is way better. And so this is the Hunter Constantine carry belt. And full disclosure, Hunter is my friend. So he gave me the first one, and he gave me one. He's like, "Oh, try it out." And I was kind of, if I'm being honest, I took it to be nice because he was explaining it to me, and I'm like, "There's no way that works." But I was like, "Oh, I'll try it." And I subsequently have purchased with my own money, one in every color. After that,
you got to match it. You know what I mean?
I need all of them.
Yeah.
And so what's unique about the Constantine carry belt over other belts, you're looking for some amount of rigidity to hold the weight. And essentially, he has a hybrid system. So half of the belt is typical what you would expect from a gun belt. It's thick nylon with, I believe there's actually a metal insert. So it's either metal or Kydex inside there that gives it the rigidity. But then the back of it is really heavy duty elastic. And so I'm like, there's no way that holds up weight. Especially I've been carrying strong side.
Looking at it and hearing you describe it, like I immediately picture just like sagging.
Yeah, there's no way, right? Like there's no way that works. So because I've been having super rigid, heavy gun belts for a long time. Like I use the next belt would probably be another one that I use a lot.
I mean,
which one is that?
This is just Blue Alpha.
Yeah.
But I mean, like to your point, like when you hear like gun belt, like the imagery that conjures up is like super rigid, like all around. Like you don't think like something that has elastic involved.
I mean, this is like a secondary weapon. You're like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna take my belt off and whip you.
Yeah. And so I took it and I tried it, and appendix carry is probably something I became aware of when Haley Strategic came out with the Incog, which was, that's over
G-code.
10 years ago now.
Yep.
So I was like, that holster was super cool, and I was like, oh man, and I tried it the first few times, and it just never really worked for me. And then going back, we've talked about me getting hurt and my injury a couple of years ago. One of the things coming out of that injury is when I started being out in public again, but I was on crutches and carrying strong side on crutches. With strong side, I would flip the safety off on my gun.
oh wow, yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, I guess maybe I should try some appendix carry for a little while. And it started to maybe like become a thing that I would do. And then that was about the time that I tried a Constantine belt. And the stretch of the belt is what made it very doable for me. And so I started carrying appendix carrying all the time. And then when I got off crutches and I could do whatever I wanted again, and I went back to strong side, I found that I didn't prefer it anymore. Like this belt completely changed my preference and how I carry a gun to where I pretty much appendix carry all the time, unless I have like a specific reason not to. It became my default, and it's because of the belt and because of the stretch that I kind of like what Chris was talking about on his, what's the proper name for this?
The Apex.
The APX holster, how it has that flex for the magazine pouch and the holster, so this thing can give a little bit. In carry holsters, rigidity turns into pressure points, and pressure points turn into pain.
Or breakage.
Or breakage.
Something's going to give.
Yeah, and so the tension that I needed on a holster, or on a belt, the tension I needed on a belt for it to work properly while I was standing up was, let's say, 1 or 2 notches on a typical leather belt, different than what I need sitting down. But guess what? I stand up and I sit down and I do all that stuff all the time. So this is constantly adjusting how much tension you need. And so I found that it was self-regulating in how much tension it needed. And I think it requires a lot less belt tension to hold an appendix holster where it needs to be versus a strong side holster on the point of your hip. I feel like a belt has to be more rigid and tighter where it's kind of on the outside of a lever, when it's on the point of your hip, where here an appendix, in the appendix, what did you call it in the appendix episode? Like where?
So peaks and valleys.
Peaks and valleys, yeah. So when you put the holster in a valley here, it takes less belt tension to hold it kind of naturally in a valley versus strapping it on the exterior of your body and making you wider. So big fan of this belt. And then on top of that, I particularly like this one because Chris said that his holster is getting kind of gamey. Hunter actually started sponsoring matches that weren't concealed carry centric. He put $1,000 bounty on highest score shooting from concealment using his belt.
Yeah.
So you're essentially taking a dive in the match because you're shooting at a significant disadvantage on a draw speed, but it was like one of the biggest prizes at the match. So I like this one in particular because this is the one that I wore at Carry Optics Nationals, and I won the first purse with for the $1,000 bounty, and it's all in singles, which makes for great photography. So I like this one in particular, but that's a big thing that I started using this year, both the carry version and he has an inner outer belt version for competition.
Oh, interesting.
There's been a few prototypes of that one. He's still playing around with it, but I have all the variations of it. Big fan of the Hunter Constantine carry belt. Yeah.
I have to specify. Anyway.
And then on top of that comes with a holster as well. This year I started a little bit of a leather renaissance. I originally was carrying leather holsters when I first started because that was in vogue at the time. Went away from them for all the reasons people get away from them. Moisture. It holds moisture into the gun. And then fuzz and stuff like that. Like it's a natural material, so it does degrade over time. But I think one of the things also that moved people away from leather is they were kind of stuck in the box of leather designs that they'd been traditionally making for a long time. And when we went towards Kydex type stuff and people, more contemporary people started making holsters and they just happened to be making them out of a contemporary material, they started making these other shapes. So they started making an appendix holster and then putting a wing on it and then giving it some flex and stuff like that. And I started specifically the flex was like, hey, you know what else flexes? Leather. So I went back to some leather, and this one I think is actually, I'll say this is like a Kydex inspired design because this is one of the few leather appendix holsters that I see that has the wing type material on it. Without the wing, it doesn't tuck the butt in enough for me, and it's not a very concealable holster. But this is made by 5-Shot Leather, and he calls this the SME, the subject matter expert. But what differentiates this from all the other leather appendix, summer special style ones is it has a wing on it, very similar to what you would see commonplace in a lot of Kydex appendix rigs. So I got what I wanted out of an appendix rig in a leather holster, and then I'm getting some of the benefits of leather back.
I mean, to be fair, that looks a lot more rigid.
Oh yeah,
than
it's super
any
stiff.
other leather holster
Yeah.
I've seen. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons I kind of dissuade students from running leather is because like their leather holster is giving way, and I don't want to see that flap of leather get in the trigger guard during a reholster.
Leather holsters.
That doesn't seem to have that.
That
issue.
is something. If you're gonna do it, spend money. How do you know if it's a good leather holster? If you have to wait to get it.
Sure.
if it's in stock, at a retailer, you probably don't want it. Where like good leather makers now, leathersmiths like 5-Shot, you order it and you wait, and it probably take a while. And the longer you have to wait, probably the better that it is. But it's a higher grade material. It's a higher level of craftsmanship. All the really good leather holsters that I've spent serious money on, like over $150. I still have them and I still use them. Like they're still serviceable. Cheaper stuff, it does kind of wither away. So the SME by 5-Shot is another one. And this holster, actually, this was kind of, I was messaging him and he's kind of like, so every once in a while, I don't know if he does it on purpose or not, but I'll be messaging him and he's like, hey, I have this in stock. Do you want it? And I'm left-handed. And 19 left, so it's like, oh, you have left-handed stuff in stock, huh? I think I'm kind of his dumping ground for left-handed stuff. But he had this one ready to go, and I was like, oh yeah, I'll give that a try. And this particular configuration, it's part of my problem is like now I want one of these for every configuration of gun that I carry. You know, the different lengths, maybe a couple different platforms, and so it turns into several holsters that you have to buy. And then the other thing that I really like about this one, because it's a holster, so how technical can it be? But the original version of it had a hard stitched loop, a belt loop that you would thread your belt through, and I have a version like that too. And originally, I didn't really like this holster because that was the only way that it came. He started using these metal clips to go on and off.
Yep, discreet carry maybe.
Yeah, the discreet carry style clips with the hook on the back. And I really like those because, I mean, it seems like something you're going to put on in the morning and wear all day, but I do find myself taking it on and off periodically for things. So being able to slip it on, slip it off without unthreading the belt is an advantage, and it's quite handy. And also just getting ready in the morning, like it's kind of a juggling act between getting everything, all your shirts and everything tucked in, your pants buttoned, the belt, and then getting this in there. Whereas you can be dressed and then slip this in and then take it out. So I really like that. So this holster, I'm probably going to get a couple other variations of it for a couple other types of guns that I want to carry. And then, big brain idea. I was like, hey, John, why have you ever tried to do a sidecar style holster? And he was like, no. Would you? Maybe. And so he is actually working on a sidecar style leather holster. We were actually trying to get it here for this episode so folks could see it. But actually playing around with the idea of a leather sidecar style rig, because for the same reason, it's going to have that flex in the middle where Kydex style holsters have used a hinge or a comb system or the bungee. Bungee's another one. So it's like, well, what would a leather sidecar system look like? So that's another piece of gear that I've started using this year. And then everyone loves guns, so we brought a gun too. When I first started carrying 1911s, one of the ones we talked about in the 1911 episode was a bobtail, where they use an officer style or a shorter style mainspring housing in the back, and then they kind of rounded the butt at the bottom for it's a full length, full grip pistol, but it's kind of got a docked corner on it. The other version that Dan Wesson had at the time was something they called a CCO, which is a concealed carry officer, I think is what it stands for. And so they essentially just put an officer size grip on a commander size frames or upper. So a fullish size upper receiver with the abbreviated grip for a lower capacity magazine. And I decided to try. They actually discontinued that particular model. So this one's made by Alchemy Custom Weaponry. It's really something you kind of have to buy from the custom builders now. Although I don't know if Springfield came out with one or not, but for the most part, the semi-custom gun manufacturers are the ones that make these now. And so, a officer grip commander frame pistol is another thing that I've been playing around with quite a bit. Just as something that is a little bit more abbreviated, because I still want to carry a gun I can shoot. Like, there's a lot of carry guns that get carried that I don't think they're particularly good for doing what guns are for. So this is kind of like the perfect amount of abbreviations that I can do to a gun, but still have it do all the things that I want a gun to do. So still a fully functional, like, I don't know why my head always goes to the active shooter at like a big box store. It's like, are you willing to take a shot across the checkout counters at a big box store with your handgun? Yep. Like, to me, that's worst case scenario I could possibly imagine. Yep.
Or multiple shots, right?
Or
because,
multiple shots,
you get, you know, to your point, shootability. I mean, that's huge.
And so, like, here's a gun that I'm comfortable doing that with, where, you know, a snub-nosed revolver, I am not. You know, so it's kind of abbreviated in all the right ways, but still has full-size functionality. I still think I'm actually going to shoot this in some matches. I bet I could shoot, you know, full-size scores with a combat-style gun in this configuration. So that's the other thing that I brought.
Very cool.
Very cool, Adam. I feel like people would be like, you know, Adam would be like, yeah, I don't shop at big box stores. People are like, oh, like you're just like really pro small business. And Adam's like, no, I have a bona fide fear of big box stores.
I do. I did a lot of Instacart shopping during COVID, and I'm like, if it's going down, this is where it's going down. They're coming after me for the toilet paper, you know? Like,
oh yeah.
Oh, that's gold, baby. Very cool, Adam. I like everything here. Ian, you're up
now for something completely different.
Yeah,
I like it.
I'm in.
I can't spell IDPA or USPSA.
Stocks have entered the chat.
Okay, so yeah, looking at things that I used in 24 that made shooting better for me, a lot of it had to do with traveling to rifle shooting events. So usually traveling by plane. So this is like the lightning round here. The first thing that I picked up this year was stupid simple mechanism from KRG. When we travel, when we fly with these rifles, we take them apart. Well, we disassociate the barreled action from the stock, and that's primarily so that the stock doesn't break. But it's also way nicer in the airport when you've got like a 36-inch case instead of a 56-inch case.
Yeah,
like,
interesting.
Like in our case. So all this does is once you take that barreled action out of the stock, your boutique trigger is this appendage that's super, super vulnerable to damage inside the case. So they just thought, well, why don't we just mold this high-impact plastic shroud that people can bolt to their barreled action, protect that trigger in transit, and it's like a $20 thing that makes life way better, and you don't have to worry about your trigger. Yeah. So that's the first thing.
It's kind of one of those, why didn't I think of that product?
Exactly. Exactly.
Dang it.
Yeah. Very, very handy. Second thing, I like to bring a spare scope to these rifle matches. 250 people at this thing, someone's going to need, and it's nice to be in a position where you can help them. So Negrini, they're the folks in Italy that make usually like shotgun cases and whatnot, but they make this rifle case, a couple different sizes.
What?
But it's super, super awesome for like, sometimes you have an expensive optic and you want to throw it in your carry-on instead. So now you've got this rigid shell that will protect it. You can just throw it in there and not have to worry about that. So you can travel with a scope, whether it's a spare or it's disassociated from your gun for whatever reason. So very, very handy.
You're going to have to send me that link.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of case some guy slides across the table to you when he makes you an offer you can't refuse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But it's nice that you don't have to worry about it. It's got some protection there.
I like the velvet on the inside, too. It's a little bit, it's fancy.
Yeah.
Like you said, it should be holding like a shotgun or a violin.
Yep.
Or someone's finger or something.
Yeah.
Like, hey.
Yeah. Yeah, when you're really trying to send a message.
Yeah, exactly. I like it.
Okay. Another thing. We travel with our ammo, and oftentimes you'll get to your location. Sometimes it's across the world, another country, and you realize after the fact this ammo that you've shipped, it got seated to the wrong depth, or it got jostled in transport and you need to reseat it. But sometimes, the bullet gets pushed back in the neck and you actually need to pull that bullet out. Well, we're all familiar with that $10 kinetic hammer that you can pull bullets with, whether it's the green one or the red one or the blue one. And those have their place. But I've been in hotel rooms, and I can literally hear all the competitors like smacking.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
on like this fiberboard, furniture in their hotel room, leaving dents everywhere. And, well, I've been one of those guys, and you make a funnel out of a piece of printer paper, and did I get all the granules,
sure.
or there are couples that I missed, whatever. This thing, for the size of a key fob, you stick your round in there, and you just really gently clamp onto the bearing surface of that bullet, and then with this other knurled knob, you can then back that case off your bullet by thousandths at a time. So you're not trying to hit with the exact right force to try and eke a bullet out and then reseat it, trying not to spill the powder. You can do it in a very controlled, very small. I do this watching TV, at night if I need to find a better seating depth, or if I need to help a buddy out or something like that. So it's made by a company, PMA Tool. They're a Midwest company, I think Indiana, but they started out with Sinclair International, and then they sort of broke off and said, we're going to make these small, thoughtful accessories for hand loaders and competition shooters. So this is what they call their bullet puller, but it's way different than any other bullet puller you guys have maybe familiar with. So that came out a couple years ago, but I started using it this year, and I wouldn't travel without it anymore.
So Ian,
It's actually pretty cool.
I have to ask because, I know without a doubt, like I am not as particular or versed in the nuances of just this ultra extreme accuracy, but I do very much appreciate accuracy, and I've traveled on a variety of hunts, primarily in the United States, but I've never, like, I'm pretty meticulous about like making sure my rifle is shooting before I leave, and hopefully getting a chance to check it when I get there. But I've never gotten to a hunt and looked at my ammo and been like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Now what?
Well,
what are you seeing? Like, how are you even seeing what you're talking about having to fix?
Real world example, and this was last year, so this really helped, saved my butt actually. The seating stem on my seating die, there's a little grub screw that's supposed to hold that position in place, and it's something that I'm usually pretty good about checking, but it had worked its way off on me. So, long story short, it was seating each projectile at a slightly different depth, and you can tell if you're fairly close to, the throat of your chamber. Some rounds will be into the throat, and some rounds will be out of the throat.
Sure. Okay.
Well, it shows on target. You can actually feel the difference if you're used to the way your rifle shoots.
Sure.
Chambering. You can notice when you're chambering. So I had a big problem on my hands, and I was able to just back off each projectile. I think I went a 1/16 of an inch, roughly, and then was able to, with like a micro arbor press, or even like a really cheap Lee hand press, like $40 hand press, you can just reseat all those projectiles to the right space. And for someone, I'll tell you another thing. This is a handy tool for guys that they're interested in precision, they're interested in accuracy, they're long range hunters. They, for whatever reason, don't want to make the investment to become a hand loader. They don't want all that upfront cost, but they kind of want ammunition that's a little bit more tailored to the rifle and shoots better. So a handful of guys here at work, what I've done for them is I've said, okay, what ammunition do you really want to shoot? Maybe which one shoots the best right now, stock factory ammo. We're going to shoot even better for you, and we're going to tune it based on proximity of that ogive to the throat of your specific rifle. So I say all you need is just go buy 2 boxes of ammo, and then we'll take some measurements of your rifle, and then I'm going to back this bullet off of your factory piece of ammunition, and I'm going to go ahead and seat it at a few different intervals, and I want you to go and give an honest best effort test at the range, come back and tell me which iteration shot the best, and that is their seating depth. I'll take the rest of their ammo. I'll do the same thing. It takes me 5 minutes. Back the bullet off, seat it to that specific depth. Now they've got this ammo that shoots sometimes half as small as it was shooting before, and their confidence goes through the roof, and they go and kill it on their next long-range hunt. So that's another reason why, it's kind of cool to be able to manipulate at least that one variable in factory ammo without having to get into hand loading at all.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I guess I can, now that we're talking through this, I can think of an instance where I found a factory load that was shooting absolutely famously. But for some reason, I'd say probably about 30% of them were like a little tight. They just didn't want to close. It's like, would that be a case where I could take that 30% of this factory loading and just kind of reseat it to a slightly different depth and then...
Potentially. There's a couple reasons why it might have been seating a little bit tight sporadically, but if it was physical interference of your bullet to your throat in your rifle, you get to this point where, if it's really, really close in the factory, they can seat these fairly well, but not 100% repeatably. Some rounds will touch and some rounds won't, and you'll feel that on the ones that touch. You can absolutely improve on that with just a simple hand die, a hand press, and a seating die, and some method. This is kind of an elegant way, but even kinetic hammer to pull that bullet. I just don't like having the responsibility of policing all that powder and having to get it back in the case and making sure that I did. So.
Well, and also load development too. I always feel because I'm set up on a progressive machine, so I'm making volume of ammo. But when I'm trying to figure out the recipe, there's transitional ammo. You made an adjustment and you make a few of them to test, and then you make another adjustment where
then you're left with this island of misfit rounds.
Yeah, or did the powder charge really take, or is it did I have to cycle a few before it was getting a full charge? Or I like where you can kind of have a recipe and you can isolate that. These are all the same except for length. That's pretty cool.
The one caveat is this has enough mechanical advantage where you could damage the bearing surface if you really ham-fisted it. So it just takes a little bit of finesse in terms of being conscientious. You grip it as much as you need to in order to back that case off, but no more than that.
So it's circumferential pressure that's holding the projectile in there. There's nothing. There's not a screw interacting with the round itself.
No, this clearance hole is reamed, so it just barely clears, and then you can see it split, interrupted.
Yeah.
So it just clamps onto the
that's
bearing
very
surface.
very cool.
Yeah.
What was that called again?
It's called their bullet puller, made by PMA Tool. Yep. And then the last thing doesn't have to do with traveling for rifle matches. It was something that I used way more this year than I ever thought I would. It was one of those deals where you get a free 22 suppressor. I think from Silent Chico at the time, buy one, get one.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
So it was one of those things where, now I've got a rimfire suppressor and I need something to put it on. And so just asking around, people said, well, try one of these 2245s, these Ruger 2245s, get the tactical because then you can add a weapon light on it if you want to, through on our Defender ST. And holy cow, I use this all the time. Living in the country, you do have, neighbors. They're not super close, but they're within gunshot range. To borrow Chris's term, this is a really polite thing to throw in this. This shoulder holster is made by Coltac, so really super thin, simple shoulder holster, but they made it specifically so it would accept suppressed 22 automatics, whether it's a Buckmark or like this Ruger 2245. But when I'm going to check traps or going to cut wood or whatever, there's always something that needs shooting. And it's true.
There's always
we've all
something
been
to
there.
shoot.
This is
Words to live by.
hands-free. I can be on the ATV. I can be doing whatever I'm doing, and it's just very nice, discreet, and really fun to shoot with. So
Yeah, I like that. That would have been when I lived in Nebraska. I'd cut a lot of wood to stay warm because my house was built in 1910, and I always say when the wind blew, my curtains blew. And but I can't count the number of times there was something to shoot while I was out cutting wood.
Yep.
I'd probably have. I mean, and for whatever it was always not always, but oftentimes badgers.
Oh, yours is mine. My nemesis right now is red squirrels. They've been chewing my fuel lines to tractors and whatnot. So yeah, for me it's red squirrels, but badgers.
Yeah, and that was just more. I think they're.
That's the state
Cool
animal of
animals.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not allowed to shoot them here.
I know. No.
And
But accidents happen all the time.
I think the badger thing was actually related to lead mining, though, not necessarily
You're right.
having the we do have a handful. We have some Badgers here, but not. Yeah.
Well, I think lots of people make 22 pistols, and especially economical ones. I think the 2245, even before my time at Vortex when I worked retail gun sales, for a long time, the 2245 has been the safest money in a 22 pistol you could spend. Consistently good quality for what you pay.
Thinking, dude.
What do you guys like about that one in particular then?
Some people like 1911 style ergonomics, so grip angle. And so I wouldn't say it's one for one, but it's a pistol that fits well. I would say it's machined to that American craftsmanship standard of something that's made to last a long time and not be disposable.
If you're watching this episode.
And then
Talking to my wife.
Lots of different configurations. The magazines are good. 22 ammunition is a wild card, so a magazine that works is another thing. And it's a pretty simple design.
Aftermarket support. It's got the Volquartsen trigger in it, and it made a big difference.
You can spend as much money on these things as you want. And then the newer style ones, the Mark III, the OG Ruger pistol, more the Luger styled one. That one was notoriously hard to take apart, and in the era where I was in the store, they made these come apart with one button. There's a button on the back you push and the whole thing comes apart. So they're a lot easier to service now than a lot of 22 pistols are.
I will say for pure fun, it's tough to beat a suppressed 22 pistol.
Yeah, it's a lot of smiles per mile on that.
Most staple guns are louder than this thing probably would be.
Probably.
What have you been trapping?
For me right now, it's these nuisance beavers. In high school, I was trying to make money, high school money on raccoons and mink and stuff like that. But now it's I care more about the trees that I've planted, and these damn beavers will come in and dam the creek at the property. So
let me know, because Jim had a bunch of beavers on his place, but then I think he's got some neighbors, and I think collectively they got a little bit trapped out. I texted him just the other day. I had my finger on the buy now button for some Conibear 330s. I was like, dude, I want to get, and he's like, yeah, I think they might be mostly gone now. I was like, oh, so I've been looking for a guy with some beavers that need traps. So
you can run a trap line.
Yeah, I've never done it before. I've done some, never aquatic beaver trapping, but that's for whatever reason, it's kind of what I'm the most interested in.
I read some books about it when I was younger, like fictitious books, but that was centered around a mountain man or whatever. And it always seemed man, that would be cool, and I just never had the means, not means, but the access, and the time was never right to try it.
It is a neat hobby because you kind of learn about animal behavior, and you have to be target specific.
Yeah,
so we're not getting the neighbor's dog and things like that.
Yeah, it's not what walks by. It's a lot more targeted than
very
people
much
think
so.
it is.
Yep.
Very cool. Man, all cool stuff. I'm glad we had this talk, guys.
Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Fun stuff. And all similar but unique and different takes, and doing different things. Yeah, particularly your world, Ian, is just it's fascinating to me. Even though you're we're your whole practice is based on just such incredible precision. And then to hear you so then when we travel, we take the whole thing apart. I'd be once I had it together and working, I'd be no, don't touch it.
Yeah.
I will stab you if you take my match rifle apart.
Right. Cool, man. Well, thanks again, guys. Thanks everybody for listening. This is your 2024 Gear and Review Shooting Edition. We'll catch you on the next one.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.